but it's working. Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi, Meiser Sheni, Perikei, Halacha Aleph, and Halacha Beis. We're learning today Daf Memches, and we left off on Daf Memches, Amid Aleph, 2 lines from the top of the Amid. So we just came off the Machloikas, Rabbi Yechanan and Rabbi Yirmiyah. Rabbi Yirmiyah was Machadesh, Gavaldik, that the Tzenuyim, as we are going to be understanding it, that's Lehemshech, to the Shita of Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. Even though our version writes, Kol Hanilkat Mizeh Mechulol Al Hamoy, so Elo, Rav Yirmiyah argues, then again the machlikas we had between Rab Doisa and Rab Yehuda, that Rab Shimon ben Gamliel can hold that this declaration is not made in the morning. It can even, or let's go that it was made at night, Kol HaMislaket. I'm sorry, take it the opposite. That it can even be made in the morning and future tense. Whatever will be gathered, he's making a declaration, Mechulol Al Hamoyis Halalu. If he makes the statement in the morning, then we have to subscribe to Bereira. And that would mean that when the thief will be taking this revoy, it's going to go back to the moment of the declaration. The problem is that when the man made the declaration, if he made it in the morning, it's mechuber lekarka. That was the problem. So Rabbi Yirmiyah had a gewaldige answer that Rab Shimon ben Gamliel lishitosoi holds that when it comes to a pidyon, what affects the pidyon, the actual meshicha. The Meshicha here of the thief would mean when the thief takes the grape of the revoy off the tree. So yeah, he makes the statement in the morning. And then when the event happens, it's going to go into effect. But when will it go into effect? From the moment of the Meshicha. When the Meshicha is done, it's no longer Mechuber Lekarka. This is how Rav Yirmiyah understood that this declaration can even be made in the morning. It doesn't have to be dafka that he made it li toisei erev. Now the Gemara is going to throw into this discussion a big klal, which will be problematic according to those who say that the declaration should be made at night, whether it's here, whether it is in the topic of leket, as I'll explain in a moment, and l'cho'ura, it's resolved if we are to say that it's made in the morning, but it's not going to work, dafka, because of what we just said right now, that even though we subscribe to Bereira, it only goes back to when the Ganav takes it. Now, let me tell you the big rule. The big rule is, it's based on a pasuk in Parshas B'chukoisei, as we will learn in the Gemara. The words in the Torah is v'kam loy. The Torah writes regarding someone who is redeeming a field that he or she consecrated to Hegdish, the im go'oil yigal es hasode hamagdish oisoi. So then, Bachlal, we have the rule that if the one who was magdish is the one who's redeeming, the yosef chamishis kesef erkecha olav. But then the Torah writes the words v'kam loy, and it shall be his. These words are superfluous, and Chazal learn a rule, which will be a big problem according to everyone. The problem is, the rule is that a person can only change the legal status of Hegdish when you make a redemption if the item is in your domain. Here, as we will see, dafka because of us farenfering Rashbag, that it only goes back to the moment that the Ganav takes it. When the Ganav takes it, it's no longer in the domain of the owner who is saying that hamislaket mizem mechulal al hamoyis halalu. The emes is that whenever he makes this declaration, even if this declaration is made in the evening, we also have a problem that how can he make such a declaration in the evening affecting a chilul when the item is no longer in his possession and there is a rule of a kamloi? It must be that we don't subscribe to this kamloi. The Gemara is going to point out that it thought that the reason why Rabbi Yirmiyah is insisting that this declaration could be made in the morning is because if you make the declaration in the morning, at least when you made the declaration, the item is in your possession, and it goes back retroactive to when it's in your possession. So this resolves the Vikamloi. But now that we are saying that that's not true, the emes, it cannot go retroactive to your declaration because of another rule that we learned yesterday, that you can never redeem an item, whether it is Meiser Sheni, it's not Shaykh there, but let's go to the Voi, when it's Mechuber Lakarka. So it doesn't go back to the moment of your declaration. It only goes back to when the Ganef makes the Mashiach. From that moment, it's no longer in your possession, so it's going to be a problem. In other words, if anyone will subscribe to the Vikamloi, then we'll have a problem whether we're going to learn that Rashbag is saying that this man, the Tsunuyim, should make it at night, whether you make it in the morning. Either way, it won't jive with this rule that you can only redeem an item when it is physically in your possession. That's going to be the point the Gemara is going to make until the Mishnah. We're going to learn a new Mishnah, a new topic, fascinating topic. It's an exceptional topic. It means it's an exception to a rule. There is a rule that whenever the Chachamim make a rabbinic enactment, if it's to be overturned, there has to be another gathering of the Sanhedrin. The Sanhedrin has to be Gadol from the original one, B'chachma u'b'minyan, and then they can overturn it if they so find it fit. There are exceptions to that. We're going to learn such an exception. The Chachamim at one point made a rabbinic decree, and the Gemara will elaborate as to why. And that is that even though Revoi is like Meiser Sheni, which means that as long as you are outside Yerushalmi, you have the right to redeem it. Once you redeem it, the item itself you can eat, and the money has to be taken to Yerushalmi and spent on oichel or mashke or something that you will smear on your body. Okay. The Chachamim said that all of the grapes that are within 1 day walking distance from Yerushalmi, they no longer are allowed to be redeemed. They have to be physically taken to Yerushalmi. It's clear they wanted for the markers of Yerushalmi to be saturated with grapes, and that there should not be a grape shortage, as will go further elaboration when we learn the Gemara inside. There was such a decree. At some point, that decree was no longer held into account. Now, I don't think that it was repealed. Doesn't sound like the Sanhedrin repealed it. But they no longer held that standard. However, they made it clear that at some point in the future, and that will be with the coming of Mashiach, the way we will learn Pshat, this enactment will automatically go back into effect. That will be the first part of the Mishnah. Then the Mishnah brings two arguments regarding the din of Revoi. One is whether Revoi is subject to the din of a Chaimish and to Biur. In other words, is it mamish like Meiser Sheni, that if the owner is the one making the redemption, he has to pay a chaimish? Whether the time of beer will chazer that when we learn the Mishnah comes, like by all of the Meisers, there is a din that you have to remove it from your house, whether it's subject to that or not. The second machloikis in the Mishnah regarding Revoi is whether the dinim of Peret and Oileilois are relevant to Revoi. I'm going to explain again the details, whether some grapes fall off the cluster, whether the underdeveloped clusters, which is the din generally, they have to be left for the poor, whether this is included in Matnas Aniyim, or we don't say that by Revoi, and really it's going to be connected, very similar to the machlokas that we quoted on Daf Aleph, between Rab Meir and Rabbi Yehuda regarding Meiser Sheni. Whether Rab Meir holds Meiser Sheni is Mammon Hedyet, Rabbi Yehuda holds Meiser Sheni is Mammon Sfakert, Rab Meir holds it's Mammon Gavoya. I need more coffee. And Rabbi Yehuda holds it's Mammon Hedyet. The same thing we'll have over here, Machlokas Beishamai and Beisilol regarding Revoi. Whether it's Mammon Hedyet, then it's subject to Peret and Oileilois, whether it's called Mammon Gavoya, and therefore it's completely exempted from Peret and Oileilois, as we'll see in the Mishnah. And what will be Gavaldik is that when the Mishnah speaks about this rabbinic enactment, that was in effect, that went out of effect, that's going to go back into effect. And the Mishnah says that if you are living within 1 day walking distance to Yerushalayim, midrabanan, at a certain time, you were no longer allowed to redeem your grapes. The Mishnah gave you the boundaries of cities, north, south, east, west, that are exactly within the 1 day walking distance. Just the names of the cities are fascinating. Eilat, it's for sure not today's Eilat. The Mishnah, Eilas, Aleph, Yud, Lamet, Saf. that Eilas to the south of Yerushalmi is at the boundary of 1 day walking distance, and then Akrabas is the 1 day walking distance, Tchum to the north, Lud to the west, and the Yarden River to the east. That's the Mishnah. The Gemara is going to begin with stories. We're not going to have time to go through all the stories. The Gemara is going to be speaking about cities that are beyond the 4 that we just mentioned. And from the stories, it was evident that in less than a day's time, less than a full night's time, people were able to walk from there to the Beis Hamikdash. So there's going to be a problem of Pashut, how long does it, what's called 1 day walking distance? And the conclusion that we will have, whether we'll have it today, whether we're going to get to it, God willing, tomorrow, is that during the times of the first Beis Hamikdash, there were tunnels that provided direct access to Yerushalayim from many points of Eretz Yisrael. We know from other places that Shlomo HaMelech was the first one, that he was the one that invented what's called today the subway system. And when those tunnels were open to the public, a city that now, if you have to travel on the road and the roads don't go straight, it's going to take a lot more than a day. During a certain period, you got there much quicker. And those roads we're going to go by the Churban Bayis Rishon were concealed. I know there's a lot of ruchniistic meanings to that, and that will resolve all of the stories that will contradict the din that we just mentioned, the boundaries that the Mishnah mentions, as we will see inside. So, Chavra, let's dive right in. We are Daf Memches. We are 2 lines from the top, and even before Amar Rabbi Yosi, at least I'll say Balpeh again. We have to halt kop over here. That the Gemara understood that the reason why Rabbi Yirmiyah wants to say that Rab Shimon ben Gamliel holds that the statement is kol hamislaket, which is already changing the girsa, is made in the morning, there's a reason for that. Because if the statement is made at night, there is this din of a kamloi. We'll see it inside in a moment. And those, we know that there is a chazal. Now, maybe not everyone holds to it. For sure, not everyone holds to it. But we want for people to hold for it. From the words v'kamloi that we have in Parshas B'chukoisai, there we're speaking about someone who was redeeming a field that he was magdish. I want you to know that real estate is always considered to be in your possession. It means it's called karka ein exelis. That means that even if there is a strong man that kicks you out of your house, legally, no one takes land. They just displace you. But it's considered in your possession. Metaltalin is not that way. If someone steals metaltalin from you, it's no longer in your possession. So Chazal learn that when are you able to redeem a field or anything that's hegdish? When can you redeem it? When it's like the field, when it's in your possession. In the case, let's go to the case of here. A guy has a field. He's afraid that ganavim are going to go, or let's go by shvius. It's hefker. Okay, hefker here. People walk into the field and they take revoy. So the pious ones were concerned maybe this person is not going to redeem it. So look at the chesed. So the original balabas puts money and he says whatever they took is redeemed on the money. If that declaration is made when the grapes is not in his possession, he's the owner. According to this chazal of a kamloi, that declaration will be ineffective. And the reason why, that's the Gemara's understanding, the reason why Rabbi Yirmiyah wanted to say that Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel holds that this declaration, like we find over there by Leket, is made dafka in the morning. Why do you benefit? And now you have to use Bereira. You benefit that at least the declaration is being made when the product is in your possession. Now, the guy didn't take it yet, doesn't matter. We said Bereira. Bereira means it goes back. But the problem is, it doesn't go back to when it's in your possession. It's now that we explained that Rab Shimon ben Gamliel holds, that was the top line of the Amid, that really the pidyon happens during the Mashiach. Frek the Gemara Amar Rabbi Yosi, says Rabbi Yosi. Now we run into the problem of a kamloi. That means that when does it actually get redeemed? When the thief takes it. The kamloi teaches us, look inside the Torah, Shalom again, the pasuk, it says, Vim goy ligal asasoda. Hamagda shoyse v'yosef chamishis kesev erkecha, alav v'kamloi, avada v'kamloi. V'kamla is to teach you that just like a field is always in your possession, you can only be poida hegdish when it is in your possession. And therefore, the Rabbi Yossi learns this is a hemshech ilura kikaram is galgamanot. If a person sees a loaf of bread that's going down the river, v'aman, and he says kikar ze hegdish. By the way, it goes to being magdish and it goes to be unmagdish. So shema klum amar, Rabbi Yossi says absolutely not, absolutely not. So he asked Rabbi Yirmiyah, again, this is based, the Gemara is asking Rabbi Yossi is asking Rabbi Yirmiyah, why are you insisting that the declaration is being made in the morning? Because now it goes together with the rule of a kamlai, because it goes retroactive. Now that you, Rabbi Yirmiyah, are saying, and you're saying good, that according to Rashbag, it doesn't go back to your declaration. It only goes back to when the Ganav takes it. When the Ganav takes it, it's not in your possession. Now, Rabbi Yirmiyah has a Gavaldika rebuttal. Rabbi Yirmiyah tells Rabbi Yossi, well, you're right. But the other option doesn't resolve the V'kamloi. Okay, so he makes it at night. At night, the Ganav already took it. So, Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah, ad makshele lamanda Amar b'shachris. You're right. As you are rightfully asking that if the declaration is made in the morning, not according to everyone, according to the other opinions, that it goes retroactive to your declaration, then taket fits. But according to the Rashbag, it doesn't fit. Okay, it doesn't fit. So so what are you saying? Let's say you Rabbi Yechanan. What's the other option? Rabbi Yechanan. Rabbi Yechanan says, fakert, he's being the daik, it fits with the digduk, kol hanilkat. Kol hanilkat is past tense, that this declaration is made at night. How can you make a declaration? How can the owner make a declaration at night that whoever picked any of my devoy on the Shvi'is year or whenever, l'chachamim, l'rashbag, is mechulal al hamoy so'elu, it's not in your possession. You have the same problem. Amalei, Rabbi Yossi responded that man de islay li'itoisei erev leis lei li'ilen kashiyasa. In other words, the one who says li toisei erev, I know does not agree with the v'kamloi. I know that. He has to reject it. If not, it's not even shayach. The maila of saying that it's done in the morning, let's even go back to Leket, Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Dois and Rabbi Yehuda, is in order to go with the v'kamloi. And I understood, that's what Rabbi Yossi is telling Rabbi Yirmiyah, that you benefited by saying that it's said in the morning. And you don't. The solution to you can't make a redemption when it's mechuber by saying that Rashbag holds that the redemption happens by the Mashiach. It answered one question, but this also took away the maila of the v'kamloi. So you're right, not of Shachris l'Rashbag, nor li Toisei Erev will we subscribe to the v'kamloi. These Tanoim will hold that even when something is not in your physical possession, you still have the power to redeem it. So they don't hold of the v'kamloi, this limud that's learned from the v'kamloi. And that closes this sugya.
Is it possible to say that the v'kamloi happened a split second before the actual Mashiach?
Very good.
As he detaches it, so now it's detached. Now there's a v'kamloi, and then he pulls it to himself or in his pocket. And then there's the Mashiach. I don't know, some sort of, microsecond split where you can accomplish
either
both.
A microsecond split, or I know this is unique by Gittin, by Shtar Shichror, by Evet, Gittoy v'yoda boim ka'achas. Gittoy v'yoda boim ka'achas is a very deep concept, because normally in the world that we live in, this cause and effect. Two things cannot happen at the same time. Being that the Torah comes from above, L'maylam is manu makayim, when you are above time and above makayim, then everything happens at the same time. No, it's weird that we see in the Torah that the origin of the Torah is above the holy shtalshalus, is whenever there's a rule of two things happening, cause and effect, cannot happen at the same time. So maybe that will be the answer, Danny.
But Mashiach is not just putting it in your hand. Mashiach is actually like
taking it,
moving it.
Yeah, but moving it, I think when it's mechuber lekarka, I don't know if it's called Mashiach. But maybe you're saying something else. In other words, you're saying maybe the guy begins to move it. When he begins to do Mashiach before he plucks it off the tree. No, it can't be. Because it cannot be redeemed when it's mechuber. In other words, it can only be redeemed when it's not mechubar. When it's not mechubar, it's already in the hand of the ganef. When it's in the hand of the ganef, it's not in the possession of the balabas.
Usually, when you do Mashiach, usually in a behem, he has to move like all of the 4 feet. Couldn't be like the Mechuba, the Karka. Probably has to move away entirely.
Or Shloima, when something is in your hand. In other words, B'chlal, I can make Mashiach even in the Reshus of the Moicher. And that's a big difference between Hagbah and Mashiach, correct. If I do Hagbah, even there's a machlokes. You're right. Whether it's a tefach, 3 tefachim, remember that? We spoke about Kiddush, some people, the Rebbe lifted up the cup 3 tefachim. Negea. Okay. No, good. No Mishnah. Gavaldik. The Mishnah begins with a rabbinic decree that was made. And this was made, whether it was man by Rishon or by Sheni, I don't know. Normally, all of these rabbinic enactments do come from by Sheni. Kerem Rivoi. And this is dafka for Kerem. If you remember, the first Gemara in this chapter asked, is it Neta Rivoi or Kerem Rivoi? And really, the Gemara answered that the dinim of Rivoi goes even on Neta. L'kula alma in Eretz Yisrael, it goes on all of the trees. The Kerem is only vines, only grapes. Neta means all fruits. But this Mishnah, like the first Mishnah, is dafka for grapes. We're learning a unique din about grapes, that Kerem Rivoi, even though you are outside Yerushalmi, and the rule midoiraisa is you are outside the walls, you can redeem it, even if you are mamisha inch away. You're not in the city. No, the Chachamim says you have to bring it to Yerushalmi. Oilal Yerushalmi, you cannot redeem it. When you are within mahalach yoim echad l'chol tzad. When you are within 1 day's travel of Yerushalmi, no matter in which direction. And now the Mishnah gives you directions. What's considered within 1 day's travel? Now, this is for sure what we're saying now. I want to get ahead of myself. This is Bisman Bayesheni, when there were no tunnels. Ve'ezihi tchuma. What are the boundaries? So the Mishnah gives Eilas, not modern day Eilat. We know that. But there's a city called Eilas, and that's in the south. And I'm saying that Eilas is, if you live in Eilas, it would take you 1 day to get to Yerushalayim, 1 day walk. But that's it. So you are within, that means once you are in Eilas, you can no longer redeem the grapes. You have to bring those grapes. The actual grapes have to be brought into Yerushalayim and consumed there. Va'akravas minatzafin, chesed gevura, right, south and north. Akravas is a city in the north. Mairav loid mina Mairav, and Yarden mina Mizrach. And we put this on a low shelf because that's where we're going to get back to. Now, says the Mishnah, Mi sherabu hapeiros. Once the fruits became abundant, now it becomes clear that the reason why they made this gezerah was because there was a shortage of grapes in Yerushalayim, which makes a lot of sense, as we'll see later, because the Nesachim, right, many karbanis, we're learning Parsha Shalach, right? You got to bring Nesachim. Nesachim means wine. When you produce grapes into wine, for some reason, it wasn't that uncommon that during this process, it became tamei. To get wine that's fit for Nesachim, not only the quality, I'm talking about the dinim of Tum and Tara, you went through a lot of grapes. So the solution was, you have to bring the grapes to Yerushalayim. There was an abundance of grapes. And there's more to say on this, but I'll say that later. But at some point, we'll see why the fruits became abundant. One way can be the Churban Abayis. You're not bringing Nesach. So Hiskinu. Now, okay, I take back what I said before. Hiskinu means that they convened. I thought that they convened. That's called Hiskinu. Hiskinu sheyehei nifta samach l'chaima. They made an enactment that what? That we are revoking the original enactment. Even if you are samach l'chaima, mamish, you're by the walls. If you're outside, you can redeem it. But they didn't fully repeal it. When they repealed it, they made a Tanai. And they said, V'Tanai Yehoya Hadavar. They made the following stipulation, Daf Mem Ches Amud Beis, that Emosai Sheyirtzu, whenever the Chachamim find it fit, Yachzor Hadavar L'Kamoy Shehoya, the original rabbinic enactment will revert back to the way it was. In other words, like we had by Shem and Akum, when the Chachamim revoked the takana regarding Shem and Akum, they revoked it. They were mevatel it. Here they were mevatel it, but they said it's not a permanent bittul. They are saying right away that if a need arises, it should be reenacted. And I understand from this is that you don't have to actually reconvene. When the Chachamim of this man feel that you got to bring it back, you bring it back. More in the Gemara about this. And now, so that, okay, no, not more. We're not done yet. Rabbi Yossi has a little bit of a different version. According to the first version, even Bisman, Bayesheni, at some time, Misharabu HaPeiros, they nullified it with the condition. Amar Rabbi Yossi, no. It happened with the Churban, that Mishacharav Beis HaMikdash Hoya Tanai Hazeh. So this must have been by the court of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Okay. In other words, not Misharabu HaPeiros. Not that at some point there was an abundance of grapes. No, this decree was needed, but only needed because there's Nesachim. When there was no Mizbeach, since there's no Mizbeach, that's why there was no need to have this level of abundance of grapes. Okay, so it won't be so abundant. And that's why they nullified it. But again, everyone agrees that they nullified this with this little wrinkle. They said right away, Yatanai, that the moment will need to have the abundance of grapes, right away this decree goes back into effect. And according to Rabbi Yossi, if the bittul was because of the Churban, so we already know it's not what's happening in the markets of Yerushalmi. It's simply the building of the third Beis HaMikdash. That what? The Tanai, Emasai, Sheyabana Beis HaMikdash, made B'Yameinu. They said, Made B'Yameinu, imagine, when the Mishnah was put together. Then Yachzor Hadavar L'Kamoy Shehoya. In other words, L'Choira, it's going to be automatically reenacted. That's the pshat l'choira, not that you have to have a reenactment. That's the whole pshat of a Tanai. Okay. And now we're moving on.
Rabbi,
yes.
Remind me again, what are we doing with the grapes when we get to Yerushalayim?
Mamash like Ma'aser Sheni. Let me tell you a restriction of Ma'aser Sheni that we learned in the first Mishnah. Can't sell it. You have to eat it, Danny.
So if I have a truckload of grapes, I have to just start eating grapes over there?
You're going to give it as a gift to your chaverim, as we'll see in a moment. The reason why this decree resolved it is because of exactly what I just said. There were so many grapes. It wasn't that there were more grapes in the shuk. The people that needed to bring the sachim were getting a lot of their grapes from their chaverim, because how many grapes can you eat? And grapes, like all other produce, they have a shelf life. Right? We're not talking about raisins. We're talking about grapes. How long will it last? I don't know. How long do grapes last? A month? 2 weeks? There's a time.
Are you allowed to make it into wine or no?
Sure, you can make it into wine. Fakert. Grapes and olives can be made into wine. The ikir was for that. And there's the kedusha of Revoi. It's like Ma'aser Sheni.
So when you brought the grapes to Yerushalayim, there were two choices. One is you eat them, and second is you make it into wine.
Correct. And you drink that. But when I say what you cannot do with neither the grapes or the wine is to sell it. That you can do. But you can gift it. You can give a matana.
No, I get that. It was just we have two options with the grapes.
That's true. Yes. Okay. Now, two arguments, separate argument number one. When it comes to Kerem Rivoi, Beis Shammai Yoimrim, that Kerem Rivoi is not mamish Ma'aser Sheni. Yeah, it's like Ma'aser Sheni, like we just said so far. You have to take it to Yerushalayim, or you can redeem it, v'chulei. But it's not like Ma'aser Sheni that ein loy chaimish. When you redeem it, by Ma'aser Sheni, if and when you redeem it, if you are the original owner, even though there's a lachatchila dika, let's say legal loophole, but still, if you don't use the loophole, you got to pay added fifth. There's no din of a chaimish by the voy, nor the ein loy biur. The law of biur, not exactly biur chametz. Biur maisres means machloikes rishonim. Let's go with the Rambam. We learned the Rambam that erev what we call Achron Shel Pesach. I'm saying what we call because in the Holy Land there's only 7 days to Pesach. So Shvi and Achron is the same day. The day before that is the last day Chol HaMoed. On Erev, the last day of Pesach, of the 4th year of the 7-year cycle, and of the 7th year of the 7-year cycle, a person has to see to it that they don't have in their possession any of the maasros. See, don't confuse the obligation to separate truma umaiser to be mesaken the table, which you have to do before you eat it. But after you separated the truma and the maiser, you don't have to give it right then. You don't have to. Everything is mesuken. You put your money in a tzedakah account, and then you'll give it as you see fit. But it doesn't mean you can keep it on the side, lo'olam vad. There are 2 times, like I just mentioned, according to other Rishonim, it's Erev Pesach of the 4th and 7th. According to the Rambam, it's Erev Achron, Shvi and Achron Shel Pesach of the 4th and the 7th. You have to remove it from your house, which means you have to give it to its recipients. And by the way, if you can't find the recipients, then you have to destroy it. So that is Meiser Sheni is part of the Meisers. In other words, Meiser Sheni, even though really Shana B'Shana we learned, ideally Meiser Sheni should be taken to Yerushalayim, or the Mammon should be taken to Yerushalayim on that year. That's ideal. But if you didn't do the ideal, you have until the Zman HaBiur. But from the Zman HaBiur on, it's too late. Beis Shammai says Revoi is not completely like Meiser Sheni, Ein Loi Biur. But regarding both the Chaimish and the Din of Biur, Yesh Loi. So that's the first machlokes in the Mishnah, whether it's mamish completely like Meiser Sheni, or whether they part ways by the dinim of Chaimish and Biur. Now there's another machlokes in the Mishnah. Again, Beis Shammai Beis Hillel. Beis Shammai Yoimrim. Let me go into just normal. When you have a cluster of grapes and you're picking it up, we're talking about when you're picking it up in the field, when you're harvesting your grapes. If a grape falls off the cluster, you have to leave it on the ground for the ani. That's called peret. It's very similar to the din of leket that we just spoke out yesterday. Leket is said when it comes to grains. Peret, aprat, is said when it comes to grapes. Oileilois means when you are harvesting your grapes, if you have a underdeveloped cluster, we already learned together what's the definition of underdeveloped. It doesn't have a shoulder, doesn't have a tail with all of the pratim. It's halachically underdeveloped. You have to leave it on the vine for the poor to take. This is included in the matnas aniyim. So the question will be, during the Revoy year, are you obligated to leave peret or not? Beis Shammai said, yeah, yesh loy peret. V'yesh loy oileilois. Which means that you have to leave it for the poor. Now, don't forget, it's also Revoy. You see, when it comes to the matnas aniyim, not in the year of the Revoy, we kept on learning this. When the ani gets peya, the ani doesn't have to separate trumas from meiser. If the ani gets shikha, it's like 100% tax-free. Matnas aniyim are excluded from any other. The ani is good to go. Now that the Shammai says that the dinim of peret and oileilois are relevant for produce of the 4th year, don't forget. So the ani gets to keep it, but and then now he has to either take it to Yerushalayim or he redeems it. In other words, if he's not bringing it to Yerushalayim, don't forget, it's included in the matnas aniyim, but the aniyim have to know that this is from the year Revoy. They are now subject to adhering to the rules of Revoy. Why does Beis Shammai say that it's subject to Peres and Oleilos? So the reason is because Beis Shammai holds Keshitas Rabbi Yehuda by Meiser Sheni, that Revoy is Mamain Hediyat. So why would it not be subject to the dinim of Peres and Oleilos? I mean, even though the owner has to take it to Yerushalayim, I know, but it's his. And the Torah says when you own a field, in this case, you own a vineyard, the pratim lach, the single grapes that fall off the clusters or the underdeveloped clusters have to be left for the poor. Why would it be different? But Beis Hillel no, kuloi legas. On the year of Revoy, there is no matnas aniyim. The peret belongs to the owner. which means the owner can take it into the wine press. By the way, the wine press would mean that the wine he takes to Yerushalayim. Whoever asked the question before, the wine doesn't need to be made in Yerushalayim. The point is, let's go with these words, that Beis Hillel holds, Kishitas Rabbi Meir by Meiser Sheni, that what? That Revoyi is considered Mama in Gevoya, so it's exempt from Matnas Aniyim. Mama in Gevoya is, whatever belongs to God is completely tax-free. Beautiful. Okay. That's the end of the Mishnah. So we had these two arguments, but now we're going to go back. We're going to go back to the first law of the Mishnah.
Sorry, just a quick logistic question. Since wine, being a liquid, is heavier to carry, doesn't it make sense to take the grapes and make wine in Yerushalayim?
Only a Russian chassid asked that question. I'll tell you why. Because Bayuns, mashke is mashke. But let's try to become a lahavdil, a Californian. Wine. Wine is wine. And those Yerushalmis, they don't know how to make wine. My Bubba knew how to make wine. In other words, if you're machshav wine, Vlad, you're right. I would rather schlep 10 times the problem, but to have wine than to have the Yerushalmi make it in his basement.
I understand. It's a California problem.
It's for the fine schmeckers. It's for the wine drinkers. You're right. You have the option. And by the way, you can make it in Yerushalayim, but you have to know how to make wine. Meaning, you have the cask. The casks, the chachma is in my basement. Just time to know, I can make the wine in my house. I just can't drink it outside Yerushalayim. Okay. Now, we already spoke out that it's connected to the Nesachim. So let's go read it inside. In other words, why did they make this enactment? They made this enactment, it sounds like they wanted for the Shuka Yerushalayim to have more grapes. But why wasn't there enough grapes? So Amar Afila explains that since people who needed to bring Nesachim, where did they get the Nesachim from? They bought grapes and they made it. But don't forget, by Kachim, there's a din of Tara, higher level of Tara. And, when we learned the Rambam Tara, when we learned of every now and then the din of Tuman Tara, especially when we're speaking about that something that goes to Hegdish, even a Revi can become Tamei. Even on the level of a Revi, it's very shaykh for something to become Tamei. Normally, even people that kept the dinam of Tuman Tara, but the most they went to was to a Sheni, by Chulin. Bitamol, Yechat, oh my God, it touched this, that touched that. For this, it's a problem. Turns out, just to know the fact, is that when you are making Yayin Linasachim, you're going to go through a lot of grapes. Much more grapes than what you need. Why? Because some of what you made, you'll discover was Tamei. That's the word. Since Chaya Oisim Yayin Betara Linasachim, so you needed a lot of grapes were needed to make the Nesachim. So there came a time where so many grapes were used for the Nesachim, there was a shortage of grapes. What happens when there's a shortage of grapes? The price goes up. So first of all, there is the concept we want Yerushalayim to be abundant, but there's also a price issue. So that's the takana. Hiskinu sheyehi oila Yerushalayim mahalach yoim l'chol tzad. I mean, they had a balance. Yeah, we get it, Vlad, exactly. We don't want people to have to schlep. We get that. The Torah says that. Okay, so they said, okay, you're going more than one day, don't schlep. If it's within a day, then you got to take it. And what, I want to just add, what was benefited by that? It's not just the way you think that there were more grapes. It's much more than that. Since there is a law, Revoy is like Maisa Sheni, according to everyone, in many dinim. Maybe not in all dinim. That was the machlokes in the Mishnah. But it is similar to Maisa Sheni, L'Kula Alma, that you cannot sell it. So if I'm obliged, if I have the right, I have a vineyard within the days of Yerushalayim, and I can be paid it on money, what am I using that money for? It doesn't have to be for grapes or wine only, for anything. But the moment I'm chayiv to bring the grapes, those grapes have to be consumed. And if I cannot eat all of those grapes, then I give it to my friends. So there was already a big injection of grapes in Yerushalayim that were pashut given to people that needed to bring the sachim. Af hein mechalkin oisam lekroivim v'leshchenim. They gave it to their relatives. They gave it to their neighbors. Look at the seder of Rafila. That means he held that a person is closer to his relative than to his neighbor. No, he should come to America. Here, you're not close, not to your relative, not to your neighbor. Or ulim yodaim, to your chaverim. Bottom line is that there was so much grapes that it resolved. So afilu davar kal hoyimaateres ashuk. In other words, it resolved the issue. The shukei Yerushalayim were filled with grapes. And that's that. So either, going back into the Mishnah, so what happened? Either the pshat in the Mishnah is that there came a time that there were so many owners of vineyards, even bisman habayis, that it was okay. There wasn't a shortage. Or the other version in the Mishnah, and I know, as long as the Beis HaMikdash was standing, the takana stood. When the Churban Habayis came, now there's no more Nesachim. Now they were mevatel it, but they made a tanai that it could be reenacted whenever needed. L'chayda, I'm just want to say l'chayda that with the building of the third Beis HaMikdash from Heda the Amenu, Amen, after all these 1900 years since the Mishnah was written, l'chayda today, because of transportation, I don't see for there to be any shortage in Yerushalayim at all. Think about it. In other words, there it was a different world. Today you if you need double, you need triple, you need quadruple. Also, the whole mahalach yemecha, the whole thing changed. You can't carry vlad. Today you have a car. People traveled, many people, by the way, many people were oil liregel, even though they had horses. They walked up those mountains with their feet. That's the mitzvah, but I'm saying, but now with the transportation, not for the aliyas liregel, I'm sure people when Mashiach will come will walk. But the items, the food stuff will go in trucks. Will go in drones. Okay, weiter. And let's see how far we can get because the next daf is a little bit big. So the bottom line will be, where's the Gemara going right now? The Mishnah gave 4 tchumen to cities that are in the boundary of within 1 day's travel to Yerushalayim. Elas from the south, Akrabas from the north, Lud from the west, and the Yarden River, the Jordan River, to the east. Problem is, this Mishnah appears, this Mishnah appears to be pliga, to contradict al Nakai. Nakai is a shame, Adam. Nakai is a story told about Nakai. Now, what's the story? Here's the story. Nakai have shamish b'migdal tziviyasa. He was the shamish, he was the gabbai in a place called the Tower of Tziviyah. Now, it's self-understood, whoever wrote the Gemara here, that this Migdal Tziviyah was further than any of these cities. I don't know whether this was north-south. Okay, well, the only thing I can tell you that it wasn't the east. We're not going east of, maybe it was also, maybe it was in Jordan. But whatever, everyone knew this place is even further. And the Gemara is saying that even though that he was a shamish in that location and that tower, whether it was a tower, a skyscraper, whether it was a city, b'chol aruv hashuva, every Erev Shabbos, he wanted that his Tchum Shabbos should begin from the Beis HaMikdash, which would allow him to walk from Yerushalayim 2,000 amas in any direction from Yerushalayim. And as we know, that when you want to place an Eruv, there's 2 ways of making an Eruv a Tchumen. One way is putting food there. He put the food there. So every Erev Shabbos, he would go from where he was. B'chol aruv hashuva min dahava ovid kandiloi. After setting up his kandiloi, how do you say in English, Neiroi Shabbos? Candles. Now, I'm sure he didn't do it right before Lichbenchen. A stam on the side. Even though the ikir fulfiller of the mitzvah derabanan, from the Sheva mitzvahs derabanan, of Hadlakas Neder Shabbos Kodesh, are the women, it's an inyan for the men to be involved in the mitzvah. In the good old days, that the candles didn't light quick, and it was not that uncommon, you can do it now, is that you lit the candle for a moment for it to singe, and then you put it out. That was one minhag that many men had out of Shabbos to prepare the candles that way. So when their wives light it, it's already easier for the nair to be oilam aleh, or pasha to physically set it up. Anyways, this Nakai, he would be involved in setting up the candles. I'm sure he did it, let's say, chatzois. So from when he set up the candles, you know what he did? Havisolak shavas b'bei magdasha. He would go to the Beis HaMikdash, he would place his Eruv Tchum in the Beis HaMikdash. That's tam on the side. There must have been lockers there. I'm thinking about 770. If someone were to place an Eidov Tchum in 770, just imagine. You go put over there your matzah, your challah, and an egg. Would it exist when shab by bein hashmashes? I would say not. A chassidische geneva, a non-chassidische geneva, stama geneva. Somehow in the Beis Hamikdash it was safe. But 1 second, I want you to know that he took in Shabbos in his city the nachasu madliklein, and then he would go back to his town of Migdal Tzivia, and he would light the Shabbos candles. Bottom line is that he lived in a place that was further from these boundaries. Even if he set up, my friends, even if he set up his candles Friday morning, the fact that he can walk to the Beis Hamikdash and walk back. So how can you tell me that those cities are with mamish? If you live there, it takes you a whole day to get there. You can live further, and you can go and come during the daytime of the day. That's kasha number one. There's another version of the story. Mati, one more minute, one more line. We'll stop after this. There is the Amrin. Other people say that the Nakai wasn't a Gabbai, but he was a Seifet. He was a teacher. Whichever one, he was a big man. And B'chol Aruva Shupsa have a Saliku Pashat Sidre LeBeis Hamikdash. So what happened was like this. He would teach. In the Beis Hamikdash, many texts that we have right now are not accurate. That's the whole beauty of the Yerushalmi today. We combed through it. You know where they had the most accurate texts? In the Beis Hamikdash. There was a library there. So he was a teacher. You know, people used to teach on Shabbos. So what did he do? Every year of Shabbos, whatever he was planning to teach, he had his sefer. He would go to the Beis Hamikdash. He would, what's it called? Text, proofread. And then v'nachas v'shavas bebeisei. Bottom line is that if he was able to go from Migdal Tzivia to the Beis Hamikdash and back on that of Shabbos, Migdal Tzivia is further from these four cities, the four boundaries. So how can the Mishnah give boundaries? When you see travel can be much quicker. We'll stop over here, and we have many more questions. The resolution will be